Welcome to Greatness Mindset. I am Dr. Aisha Alsheikh. I'm a medical scientist and researcher turned therapist, coach, mentor, and business entrepreneur. Greatness Mindset is a podcast that brings you motivational and authentic messages from incredibly inspiring and extraordinary people, where I dive in and deconstruct their mind to explore different aspects of their lives, from entrepreneurship and leadership to motivation, fears, and how they overcame their struggles, tackled their inner demons, and overcame adversity. This show dissects the psychology behind their successes to help you discover and unlock your inner potential and give the most effective tips, advice, and lessons that you can emulate or apply in your own life, especially if you are just starting your entrepreneurial journey. Each week, I bring you an inspiring and extraordinary person, so keep yourself updated with the latest episodes by subscribing now to this podcast. It's not happiness that we actually want. We are told that we want happiness all the time. Happiness is not a permanent state, so it's not possible to always be happy. What we want to be always striving for in life is contentment. Contentment is balance. We all define success differently, but what we all need is balance. By Tanner H. Hicks. This is episode 10, and in this episode, my amazing and inspiring guest is Tanner H. Hicks, who has a civil engineering background but got into property from the age of 18 and developed a 7-figure property portfolio. Tanner is a property developer and owner at Ajito Property Group. He's also an investor, mentor, and wealth coach who aims to give people better financial education and help them unlock their true meaning of wealth. In this episode, Tanner shares his story and struggles when building his business and also shares his lessons, wisdom, and tips. So without further ado, let's start this episode right now. Hi and welcome, Tanner. I would like to share with our listeners a bit about your background story and the main turning point in your life that led you to your current career where you are right now in life.
Sure. It's a pleasure to be here for a start. Thank you for obviously inviting me on. So I mean, just very briefly, I suppose, I suppose the quick summary. I'm a civil engineer, trained by training. So I went to university, got a master's in civil engineering. Ended up in a job in Croydon in London back in 2009, I think, and working for a big consultancy company, designing airports, aviation, like sort of projects. And to be fair, it was quite a good job. I enjoyed it, especially at that point in my career, sort of graduate. I had a lot of opportunity to travel, go out to see the world a little bit. So it was great, but after sort of a couple of years, I started to realize that the hours are getting progressively longer. You know, I was finding that I was working, as a 22-year-old from sort of 8 in the morning through to sometimes like 10, 11 o'clock at night for this consultancy business. There's no opportunity of overtime, or because it was sort of expected as well. And I just got a bit fed up with it, if I'm honest. And it kind of made me realize that, hang on a minute, why am I working so hard and breaking my back for somebody else when, there's loads of opportunity out there to sort of do it for myself. And so that was one of the sort of the initial first turning points for me. I had enough of that, really. But what I was trying to do is get a secondment to Turkey. With the company because I built some really good relationships with the Turkish contractors. I was working on a project out there in Istanbul and Izmir. So I tried to get this secondment over to there to practice and perfect my Turkish, because I can speak a little bit Turkish, having a background from there. And that sort of dragged on for 10, 11, 12 months. And when that then didn't happen, that was kind of it was twofold. It was the fact that I was getting a bit fed up anyway, and then the fact that this didn't happen, that was kind of the big turning point. I said, right, that's enough. And so I sort of new ventures, a new way of kind of how to then transition into doing something that I was a lot more passionate about, which is now what I'm doing, which is kind of more entrepreneurial, which is starting businesses, property investment was really the kind of the main thing that I got into initially to kind of build up some additional cash flow that enabled me to transition sort of from that job into working for myself with a bit of income behind me that kind of covered the bills. And then from there, I've gone on to sort of do more property development. I've got a couple of businesses now. Do consultancy and training within that space now as well. So, but that was the main turning point for me back then. And, you know, there's been other turning points. Obviously, as you go along through life, you kind of realize that there's always pivot points as you go, as you're figuring stuff out. But that was the main one.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that part and bit of your story. I'm just looking at the transition period of when you just quit, you decided you didn't want to do this anymore. What was it that made you decide, okay, I'm going to go into the property, let's say? And also, did you have the fear associated with starting something new? So basically, what would you tell someone who's in that situation now, who fed up with their job, who are like, you know, basically is in that situation where you were in, and what steps did you do to get you to where you are in a way? Yeah. I mean, that's a great question, and I think I think there's a number of things. I think there's a number of points you made within that. So I'll try and kind of pick them up as we go through. So I suppose first of all, about the kind of how did I transition. It's about I had quite a sort of established, having an engineering brain. I sort of I'm quite good at sort of unpicking process and trying to so what I did is I had a very clear vision as to where it is that I wanted to kind of go with it and what I wanted to achieve. So and that was, for me, it was to leave my job and replace my current income. So I knew what my current income was. And therefore, that set me a very specific target from a financial perspective. And then obviously the drive for me was to kind of leave the job because I kind of had enough. So that was the first thing, was to really establish what that end goal was. The commitment, again, was there from me because, again, I really wanted it. It was something I really, really wanted to do. And it's obviously something that had been building up in me anyway. So when I had that drive to do it, that's kind of what a big factor as to how to then achieve that. But that was the first thing. And then, and like I said, mentioned is the finances. The finances are obviously really key for anyone transitioning through that period, because it's ultimately the finances that kind of cause us the most stress, but also is normally what holds us back into the jobs and within that comfort zone that we're within, right? We've got the security of income, you know, we may have overheads, we've got, you know, maybe dependencies as well, people relying on that income. So to sort of take that big step and transition, you know, there's a lot of fear there. And I think it's very, very normal to feel afraid of transition of, well, what if it doesn't happen? What if it goes wrong? But I think that's a very normal thing for us to feel. And if anyone who's sort of listened to any kind of Tony Robbins stuff, and I'm a big Tony Robbins fan, you know, he talks about us having, you know, 2 million year old brains, which are designed to protect us and to go into that zone of comfort. And therefore, whenever we sort of approach anything that's, you know, slightly outside of our comfort zone, we will naturally want to retract into that. So we're going to want to not push ourselves beyond that fear. And so fear can massively hold us back. But like I said, you know, if we don't kind of push ourselves through it, if we don't change the approach in our minds to sort of say, right, okay, we are going to make this happen. On the flip side, as human beings, we all have this inherent capability and just an amazing adaptability to make things happen. So when we are pushed into a corner, when we have no other options, we will always find a way out. And I think sometimes it could, you know, it is incredibly uncomfortable being in that situation, don't get me wrong, but we always find a solution because we are capable, you know, of evolving. We're capable of doing that. So I think, you know, for those people who are perhaps embarking on, or maybe on the edge of that cliff, let's say, of right, I want to do something's really within me that's kind of wants me to push me to another level, or to leave that job, or whatever it may be. It can be anything in life. Then you're going to feel afraid. You're going to feel incredible fear. And I felt that massively, don't get me wrong. You know, I had, by that point, I bought my first property in Wimbledon, which was where I was living. So I had a mortgage to pay. My girlfriend had moved in with me at the time as well. So we were kind of sharing the bills there. And,
I was fortunate that I was young enough to not have any kids, for example. So I didn't have anyone on that side of things to kind of rely on that income. So I was a bit more free from that perspective. But of course, I felt incredible fear. I mean, because it's like, what if it goes wrong? What if I can't replace that income? So what I then did is I sort of tried to make a bit of that transition plan. And I think a transition plan is really important. So it's, like I said, have that real clear goal, know what the financial target is, and then use your spare time, invest that time to actually put the additional income in place rather than sort of go down the pub when everyone else is going down the pub, and I think getting that balance is right, and I didn't, of course, lock myself in a cupboard 7 days a week for 3 years. I still went down the pub, I still did social things, but just not every night, not all the time. So I kind of put that plan in place, and I just sort of start putting things, start doing stuff, and action at the end of the day leads to results. So it's just doing the same things over and over, and just mapping yourself towards where you want to get to.
I think what you're trying, basically, just to sum it up, is having that clarity of that goal, first of all, knowing where you want to go, and then investing and committing the time and effort to actually just go through it and dismiss all the doubts that you might have, and just go for it and try. So
100%, because I think, so basically I've sort of, and we've talked about kind of pivotal points and we'll probably get onto it, I'm sure, but basically having that clarity behind what that end goal was incredibly powerful, and it is empowering as well, especially when you're 100% committed to that. We can all kind of have aspirational dreams of, it'll be great to one day own a nice car, or it'll be great to own a nice house with a view. But unless you're 100% committed to it, it's going to keep sort of staying in the distance. So I think commitment is absolutely key, but clarity, like you've said, is just as important. Because once I then got to that position, I worked so hard for a couple of years to get to that position of being able to transition into full-time employment. Over one Christmas in 2013, I think, early 2014, I was like, right, that's it, boom, full-time. But then I didn't have that next plan. So I didn't then know, actually, once I got there, what that 100% committed plan for that next phase of my life was going to be. And then I sort of embarked on a 2-year period of just kind of trying to figure out stuff, throw enough crap against the wall and see what stuck. And then my direction, my drive, it kind of almost inverted. And then it's after a couple of years, I had a mini breakdown. I kind of, really struggling with, small amounts of depression. Simply because I didn't then know what I was now. I kind of got to where I wanted to be, but then like I said, I lost my way. I lost that clarity. I lost that drive for the next thing. So that's the other thing. It's a massive lesson from my journey, which is to obviously have that clarity initially, but then have the next thing already lined up to know, once you get to that initial interim, I suppose, goal, what the next thing is. Because otherwise, if you don't have that purpose, if you don't have that meaning of what you're working towards, then it's very easy to float. It's very easy to kind of lose your way and lack discipline and lack drive, for example. Yeah,
this is exactly, you just reminded me of what Tony Robbins said, in terms of you have to have clarity, but also set the goal to keep the momentum going. Otherwise you lose that momentum, and then you just get stuck where you are, because achieving something, once you achieve it, it's just momentary lasting pleasure, but then it's like, what's next? So it's important to keep going and keep trying to keep achieving, and that's probably what you've been doing. But I think a lot of people, like you've been through as well, is got stuck in that stage where they didn't have the next step, but then they ended up, you eventually found your way out of it and then went through it. So that's an amazing way of just perseverance, basically. That's a good example of perseverance in a way.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, the other thing as well with it is certainly a big learning curve for me in life, particularly over the last few years, is to realize that, it's really important to have clarity, really important to have goals, but the whole of your life is a journey. So it's not just, it shouldn't just be broken down into a 2-year or 5-year goal. At the same time, everyone talks about having lifestyle. What's your end ultimate goal? I mean, for me, that no one really should ever have an end ultimate goal, because if you got to your ultimate goal in the next 5 years, then what? You know, it's like, okay, well, you're just going to, is that at the end of your life? What are you going to do next? You're just going to, you know, so I think I think ultimate goals, I don't think really is the right terminology, but it's about, just wanting to level up each time and being aware of what the next step is for you, and not being afraid to pivot from one thing to the next, start new things, explore, experiment, new ways of working, new teams, new environments, travel more. We're very fortunate to live in a world where we have all these opportunities, to the point, I think sometimes we've almost got too many opportunities, to the point where it's like, okay, well, I could do literally anything, so I'm too confused, therefore I won't do anything. It's about kind of picking what you really enjoy, what's really passionate, what you get passionate about, what gives you a big kick and a big drive. And I think a lot of that is about, sharing, giving, adding value to others around us. And I think that's one of the biggest things, especially now we live in a very capitalist, commercialized world where we're quite self-involved. We're quite a selfish population now. We're becoming more and more selfish, I believe. That's creating more issues. I think, if anything, we need to be trying to go back to that 2 million year old brain, which is more about community, which is all about, looking after others, sharing, and that's where we get the most fulfillment, I believe. It's getting that balance. Balance is a big key word for me. I talk about that a lot. It's about getting the right balance across different spheres, and life's not easy by any stretch of the imagination. And I think to think that it's easy also doesn't help. But it can be quite very rewarding, or less so. And it's all how we look at things and perceive them, really. As I like to refer to it as being stood on the side of a lake, okay, and wanting to get to the other side of the lake. But if you don't know exactly where it is, the other side of the lake, you're going to get lost on the lake, right? So you need to know exact destination that it is on the other side of the lake. And so if you don't know where you want to go, and you don't have that drive, you don't have that commitment, it's like pushing yourself out on the boat, hitting the engine, pulling the rudder out, and then just floating for the rest of the time, just going left and right, whichever way the wind goes, whichever way the water's going to go, it's going to take you. And you're not actually driving yourself forward to that end destination. I think it's very easy to get stuck in the middle of the lake and just float for a while. And that's when obviously we start to kind of start questioning whether it's worth jumping off. So.
Wow, that's a beautiful analogy to actually bring that. My next question for you is, I'm sure you've had doubts that came to your mind. How do you overcome your own self-doubt, if you overcome it? Because self-doubt sometimes can be useful, but having that, whenever it creeps in, whenever that like demotivation, like whenever you feel defeated, how do you get yourself out of that situation if you wanted to?
Yeah, it's a really, again, good question. God, this is a tough question. Yeah, no, you've got some good ones here. You've done this before, haven't you? So, okay. So, I think the first thing to sort of, I suppose, say on that is self-doubt, fear, questioning things that you do it happens to everyone, regardless of whether you're sort of at the start of your journey or whether you're, I don't know, Tony Robbins, let's say, or like Richard Branson, they're going to have the same things. And it's a very natural psychological thing. I suppose the way that we overcome that is by creating different habits, so that we're sort of conditioning our mind on a daily basis to be more positive and try and find and seek the positive outcome in problems, in issues and stuff. So by having an overall holistic positive outcome or positive view on the world, on the situation, that will massively help. So what do you do? What do you do personally? Whenever you have these, personally. So basically, it's then a case of it's changing the state. So what we've got to then do is, right, when I start questioning myself, first of all, it's recognizing that I'm questioning it, right? So it's like, and I will catch myself being like, okay, well, I'm now thinking, well, what if this goes wrong? What if that goes wrong? I'm not going to do this because just in case somebody questions it. So I'll try and first of all recognize that, and then I'll take a step back and I'll try and change that state. So either I'll kind of do something else, I'll distract myself, maybe put on some music, put myself into a bit more of a positive mindset, and then I'll come back to that kind of thing again. If I'm still questioning it and I'm still having doubt, the next most powerful thing, which I'll always do, is I'll speak to somebody else about it. I'll speak to my wife. She's probably my greatest mentor. I'll sort of say, look, I'm thinking about doing this. I'm kind of questioning it. She'll help me see it from the outside view, because we should never underestimate the power of somebody else looking in on you. And be like, well, hang on a minute, why are you worried about it? By the way, you're just clearly getting yourself caught up in this little cycle of self-doubt. This person's done it before and it was easy, speak to them. Or, I don't know what you're worried about, just do it and see what happens. And so they can kind of help push you forward. If you've got a mentor, again, so I've got a number of mentors who I lean on for different things, both, friends who are kind of people above me who are sort of further ahead, should I say, on their journey, who I kind of lean on, I've got really great relationships with. So I'll just give them a call and say, look, I'm really questioning this. I've got paid for mentors, for example, as well, who I'll have like dedicated sessions about stuff, and I can reach out to them. So other people and communicating that is really important, and I think they can help break down that self-doubt or that questioning and really kind of make you think, turn it around to which is like, rather than think, okay, you're self-doubting it, how can you overcome it? How can it not be a negative outcome? And also, what is the worst that can happen even if you were to do it? So if you can put some value behind that, then you'll kind of most often than not realize, actually, what am I worried about? Just crack on and let's see what happens, and then learn from that. That's always really key.
I think you've raised a very good point that I just want to clarify even more, because what you just said, it's asking people, but sometimes many people ask the wrong people. So it's important to highlight that you need to ask the right people, to go seek like the advice from people who actually know what they're doing, because most of us will go to maybe to your spouse. In this case, you're lucky to have a wise spouse, but many people go to their friends who actually absolutely have no experience whatsoever and just take their opinion on it. And that can be actually detrimental to some people and actually can hold them back, because, you shouldn't be doing this, you shouldn't be doing this. But then, it's important. I just wanted to highlight that it's important to also ask the right people, because having mentors, having coaches, these are the right people you go and ask for advice from.
100% agree. And I think, I think, for example, using, like, say my wife as my mentor, for example, the reason I tell her everything. And I think one of the biggest reasons for doing that is as part of what my kind of a few years ago when I had some like real challenges, one of the root causes for that was that I wasn't communicating enough with her. I wasn't telling her about these challenges. So I was kind of taking on all these issues and challenges myself on my own shoulders and trying to overcome them and deal with them to the point where it got kind of too much. So I think to then share that with her and be like, by the way, I'm really struggling with this or whatever, and share some of that decision making is really important, because what I do affects her. And the biggest reasons why I do what I do is for her, is for my daughter. We've got another daughter on the way, for example. So it is for them. So why not involve them in that decision making? Now, a lot of people I speak to who I mentor as well, I say, well, my spouse doesn't understand what I do. I don't feel like I can talk to them about it. And to be honest, that's exactly how I felt at the start of my journey. But it's about then educating them and helping them change their mindset to see the world in the same way that you see it, but at the same time allowing them to educate you in the way that they see the world, because again, you're a team, all right? You're together, so you have to compromise and you have to see things in a different way. But if let's say your spouse has a negative mindset, so they look at the world in a negative way and everything's always a challenge and always an issue, then your point is valid in the sense that you may not want to immediately go to them, but you should still talk to them about it. Then almost use them as a way to then kind of negotiate why you wanted to do the thing that you are fearful of in the first place. So let's say, let's take an example like this podcast interview with yourself, but beforehand I was quite afraid of doing it. I wasn't sure of the questions that you're going to ask me. I'm afraid of what people may think of me as when they listen to this and maybe send me some abuse online, for example. I didn't feel that, but let's say as an example, that is the case. And I'm self-doubting whether I should turn up. Now, if I know that my wife, for example, and again, this is not the case, this is all theoretical, has a very negative outlook, and which is just like, why are you bothering with that? It's a waste of time. You should be focusing on more kind of income generating tasks, or you should be doing something else that's more useful of your time. Then I would be using it as in a case of, right, I'm going to do this podcast, and can I negotiate why did I agree to do it in the first place with her? And if I can turn her around to the reasoning as to why I agreed to do this with you in the first place, then that in its own right will overcome some of the self-doubt that I had about turning up. But then if I approach it obviously in a very negative way, which is like, oh, I don't think I'm going to do this podcast, I don't think it's worth it, she's just going to agree with me and be like, yeah, don't do it then. So can you see, like, it's again, you drive that yourself. But yeah, like you said, getting others, having people who get you and also other mentor in that sense are the people that you aspire to be. They're the people that you want to be trying to get the advice from, because like you said, there are other people you could ask anyone, but if they're not who you aspire to be, then probably not as valuable speaking to them as it would be to find those. There's 5 people we talk about regularly, don't we? Which is, if you want to become, if you surround yourself with 5 people, you become the 6th person.
You're the average of the 5 people. The average of the 5 people, yeah. Yourself with, yeah.
So if you surround yourself with 5 negative people, you'll become the 6th negative person. If 5 entrepreneurs and millionaires, you'll become the 6th. So it's those people that you want to be getting the advice from.
I think you've raised also a different point. What I want to just to say is that generally speaking, when people mostly seek advice, it's usually they go to their friends. Yes, a spouse is a very, very important thing, because communication is key, basically. But when I mentioned that it was more about, I agree with you totally in that sense. You have to, because otherwise you're going to be doing things and they're not aware of it. And if there is no communication, then it's not actually going to be effective relationship. So it's always good to communicate. So that's a good point. But what I was referring to is when you're seeking advice, that's what I refer to. So people I hope you don't get the wrong idea, basically. Yeah. It's just seeking advice. Usually it's best from people who are going to push you forward, not going to drag you down. So 100%. That's the idea behind it.
Yeah, 100% agree.
So moving on, I just wanted to ask you a bit about, like, if you had the chance to start your career all over again, another chance in life, what would you do differently if you didn't do anything? So what would be an advice that you would say to your younger self, to knowing what you know now?
When I started out, I had a very strong will that I could do it all by myself. Like, I kind of knew how to do this, and everyone around me was, negative, and I kind of wanted to do my own thing, and I knew how to do it. We also now live in a world where a lot of people are kind of coaches and mentors and etc. And it's a big business now. And it was starting to become that 10 years ago when I started out. And, there's a big investment to get mentorship and guidance and coaching. And so I overlooked that, and I just was like, right, I'm going to do it myself. But I think if I were to go back again, I would definitely have taken on a mentor a lot earlier on in my career. So especially even as I was starting out, to kind of guide me to that initial phase. But then the most critical period was then from that point afterwards, to keep me focused on to what the next thing was. Because like I said, I lost that clarity. And I think had I had some guidance then, had I had a mentor, had I had a coach who was kind of really bought into me, my personal journey, that would have hugely helped. And I feel like I kind of lost a couple of years of kind of progress in a sense, particularly from a business sense. I think I wouldn't change it for the world, because I've learned, I think, more about life, more about the world, more about the brain and psychology as a result of going through that than I ever would have. So I probably wouldn't ever change my journey. But I would definitely have got more advice earlier on, 100%, or like I said, a coach or a mentor, because I didn't see the value in that initially. And I think I can understand why other people wouldn't as well, even now, because like I said, there's loads of people out there trying to profess to be a great mentor, be a great coach, and then people invest heavy sums and then maybe not get, there's a lot of people who aren't getting the value or seeing the value that they're getting from that. So I think, I can understand, and that's how I felt back then as well. I didn't want to kind of spend money rather than invest the money as at that time. So, but I would definitely do that again. So like now I invest quite a lot of money each year on mentorship, on guidance, on specific things, within certain areas of the business, which are, okay, for example, as you know, I've got specific guidance mentorship training on marketing, sales within the business. So to sort of grow that side of the business, etc. So that's important, definitely.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I wish I had that as well from when I was younger and started off from that personal development, getting the coach bit, because you'll always have something happen to you. Yes, you have a way of looking at the world and you think you know everything, but then everyone's got a different perspective and everyone's got a different experience, and having that, like the wisdom voice coming along the side your journey in life and actually saying, hey, no, this is a better way. Or some people get stuck because they feel they don't have options. So having that another perspective coming the way of someone who's probably been there or someone who can guide you can accelerate the success or the growth part of you, and for you to move on to the next best thing in life. And yeah, I totally agree in that sense. I just want to find out more about your biggest fear and how do you actually manage it?
Wow. What is my biggest fear? I do have a number of fears, as we all do. What's my biggest one? I think my biggest one is probably it's about sort of the safety of my family, the security of my family. Potentially losing them at some point. Life is incredibly fragile, and I think we can talk about business, we can talk about money, we can talk about wealth, we can talk about all these things, but the reality is that doesn't really matter anywhere near to me as much as they do. And I think that is therefore my biggest fear. And I think, how do I manage that?
If at all you manage it.
Yeah, I mean, you just got to get on with it. I think that's the reality of life. I think it's to realize that it's life. Life, like I've said, is fragile. And if that were to happen, then, it's then how do you overcome those challenges as you're presented with them? You can either sink or swim. And I think it's just recognizing what life is, and then, kind of cracking on, keep on keeping on, like as we talk about. So I think that's certainly my biggest fear, and I don't know how I manage it. If I'm honest, how do people manage that? I mean, how do people manage the fear of losing loved ones? You can't, right? I think you can either sort of retract again, like I said, into sort of that constant fear of it happening, and then just constantly worry all the time, or you can just accept that it's a part of life, it's a part of the reality of the world we live in, and then you just keep on keeping on. So it's that mindset thing again. Yeah,
you just gave 2 points. One is about what you just said, feel the fear, crack on. Basically, that's the definition of courage, because people think being courageous is being fearless. It's actually the opposite. It's actually being fearful and just going for it and moving on with your life. And the second part is that when you can't really get over the fact that your loved one passed away and stuff, but it's more about how you look at it and the lessons and how you view it, and change that story about it. That would probably help cope with the situation. It would never go away, no matter what you people say, but it's how you live with it. That's the part where people need to work on some aspect of it.
Yeah, and I think as well, it's about value. It's about valuing the time and appreciating the time that you've got now.
Yeah.
With them, and I think again, it's very, very easy to overlook overlook that and get used to the life that you've got and the people you've got around you, and take it all for granted.
Yeah.
So I think appreciation is a huge thing on my list, if not at the top of my list of things. So whenever I'm feeling doubtful, when I'm feeling down, unhappy, sad, whatever the negative emotional state may be, I always go to that. Let's just take 5 minutes, get my notepad out, my pen. What are the things that I appreciate the most in life? I appreciate my wife, my daughter, my house, my health, my family, and each time I write that list, I just, at the bottom of that list after 5 minutes, whether I've written 5 things or 50 things, I'm like, wow, what am I worrying about? Do you know what I mean? I've got all these amazing things around me. Everything I do from this day forward is just a bonus. And I think so appreciating that this moment in time is important. And then obviously, when we all do unfortunately leave this world, then at least you can look back at the time and realize that you appreciated that time with them when you had them, and not regret that time. And I think that's really important too.
It's basically you were falling on gratitude. That's it is. Whenever you had doubts and fear, you fell on gratitude.
It's the most powerful thing in life, I believe. Gratitude.
I believe so. I agree with you 100%, like 200%. I think people neglect that aspect. They always focus on the things they don't have, focus on the things they don't like they can't get or can't control, and forget the little blessings they have. And actually that's how they live unfulfilled life, because they keep wanting more without appreciating the things they have. And then when it comes to their deathbed, having all the regrets they have.
I mean, you know, and I think when you look at that, and I completely agree, but when you look at some of the reasons why, I mean, and again, I could chat about this for ages, but you know, I believe that, you know, I'll come back to this commercialized and capitalist world that we now live in. You know, we're constantly bombarded with messages, you know, and interrupted in what we're doing on a daily basis of, you need this, you need that, you know, marketing messages from businesses and companies who are trying to sell you something that you haven't got. You know, even social media, you've got the likes of Facebook or Instagram, you know, particularly if you're scrolling through Instagram, you're seeing other people doing things that you're not doing. So it kind of little by little, and again, it's just that slight edge. And again, there's a great book, if anyone hasn't read The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson, which is that incrementally saying, you haven't got this, you need that. You haven't got this, you need that. You haven't got this, you need that. And that's constantly playing on your mind and building up in your subconscious, to the point where you then are like, hang on a minute, I want a new car. And why can't I afford a new car? Oh, it's because let's have a look. And then it creates financial stress, and then it creates all this thing. And then this lack of appreciation for the fact that people have already got smartphones. You know, everyone pretty much, you know, a huge percentage of the population has a smartphone. And it's like, look, why don't you appreciate the fact that you can afford a smartphone? I mean, we didn't have these 20 years ago. You know, a laptop, you know, the fact that people are listening to this and have a device to be able to listen to this even, you know, these are things that we can be appreciative for, but we aren't, because we're reminded more often that we don't have the next thing. And so understandably, we as a population, as a culture, we're like, well, hang on, we've never got enough, because we're told that we need more all the time. And that comes back to the media, to the marketing of everything that other people are doing that you're not doing. And we've got to control that. We've got to actively control that within our brains, so that it becomes a subconscious thought rather than an active thought. But the reality of life is that it's going to have to continue being an active thought all the time, because we're constantly being bombarded with these messages. But there's ways that we can actually change that is through appreciation, writing a gratitude list, for example, on a daily basis, and getting into the habit of doing that. Now, I'll be honest, you know, I don't do it every single day. You know, I started out doing it every single day, but some days I won't do it. I won't necessarily actively write the list, but I'll be thinking about things. And particularly when I've got a challenging moment, like particularly when I'm feeling down, like I've said, that's when I will actually actively go into that and make the decision, right, I'll pick up my notepad, write it down, and that always helps.
I think what the world has portrayed as what success should be, what happiness should be, and people zoom in so far into it that they forget about the important things. So the first thing I would say would be, it's actually being aware that you're actually doing it, and zooming out and reevaluating the most important thing. What is really important for you? Not what the media, what really matters in this life. And I think asking the right questions and actually taking yourself out. Okay, I understand this is the world. I understand we've been conditioned that way. Well, the world wants us to be conditioned that way, to be materialistic or to be, you know, but in reality is, what is it? I think being aware that you're actually doing it in the first place, that's number one. And then I think being appreciative, that immediately should follow, because many people who are not aware of what's happening to them, and they just, because they're so into that kind of world, so into this is like this person has something, or I want that next thing, but then not evaluating really why are you trying to do this? Understanding that is more powerful and can take people to the next level in their life. So I really appreciate your message, and I think it's so powerful. And I really appreciate, you've got really insightful points you just shared with us here. So thank you for that.
No, that's fine. Yeah, I mean, it is a big thing. And like I said, it's the difference between feeling like you're under stress always, under kind of the constant sort of, I'm never good enough, to actually coming from a position where everything from this point forward is a bonus. And when you start seeing it like that, actually things, you start hitting bonuses every single day, and actually like, well, hang on a minute, wow, this is amazing. And then you almost become more successful because you're effectively in control of your own success. You know, you define what success is, and so we're all in control. Yet we always feel we're not in control, but we are. So it's that decision that we can make within ourselves to sort of see things in a different way, and that's really important.
I'm really curious. What questions do you on every day? What questions do you often ask yourself?
I'm not sure, if I'm honest. I'm not sure if I've ever sort of taken stock of what they are. I mean, I'm quite a detailed person, so I'm always asking myself to make sure I haven't, have I done everything? Have I not dropped anything? Because I come from like I said, an engineering kind of background, technical background where everything's got to be right to work, right? So in my businesses, I'm always trying to perfect things. So I suppose I'm always asking, how can it be better? How can this be better all the time? How can I improve? How can I streamline stuff? How can I provide more value? How can I make it more value for my customers, for the people around me particularly? Those are repetitive questions always, as along with what have I forgotten? What have I forgotten? And again, you know, that's in itself is a fairly negative kind of question, right? It's like, what have I forgotten? Because rather than looking at what can I do next, it's like, what haven't I done? But again, it's just about managing that. Yeah, I wanted to actually just quickly come back because you were saying something a moment. Sorry to kind of go round again.
No, it's all right.
Making about, you said about people wanting to strive for happiness all the time and the next thing, etc. Something that I suppose a kind of a destination I've arrived to is that it's not happiness that we actually want. We're told that we want happiness all the time, but happiness is not a permanent state. So it's not possible to always be happy. Like, for example, we come back to the losing a family member, let's say. That's an incredibly sad situation. So you're never going to feel happy in that situation. Yet it will happen at some point. So really what we want to all be striving for in life is just contentment. It's that kind of, that flat line sort of contentment in life, you know, and you're going to occasionally go above it and feel happy. You're going to go below it and feel sad. But what we don't want is we don't want to have too much volatility in that, or kind of magnitude either. So we don't want to feel super happy, but at the same time, we don't want to be feeling super sad. So how can we control our emotions so that we're sort of as close to that flat line as much as possible? And it sounds boring, right? And that's why it's not also a message that's kind of out there. Because who can sell stuff in this world by telling people they just want to be boring and content? It's not a sellable message. But selling happiness, selling the things that are going to make you happy is a more sellable message. But as a result, it kind of pulls us away from the actual reality of life.
I totally agree with you on that point. Many people, because they are so miserable in their life, or they think they don't have that contentment. So what they seek is an alternative, the high, to get them to where they are. But at the end of the day, it comes to that person's definition of what makes them content or happy. Or happiness does not mean like you're going to be jumping up and down and like screaming all the time, but like more about just having the things you want to have in your life and being probably happy, but not the happiness here equals contentment, basically. And I think that's what people strive for. Probably, as you said, it's probably using the wrong word for it. But that's what I view it. How personally I would view it. I would view it as like they got their own definition of how life should be, their blueprint, and that's what for them, not fulfilling that equals unhappy, and probably in people's mind, generally speaking. But at the end of the day, it comes down to that person. And I think because we live in a consumer society, everyone's wanting more, so they feel like they don't have that contentment that, you know, I have enough, I'm happy, and that comes back to the gratitude part of things. And just I think the way you look at life itself, I think having that next level awareness of how to view the life generally, rather than just be in it and be bombarded by everything. And that's where most people are, actually, because they get this and that, they get bombarded by news, how society should be, media, blah blah, business wise, but they never really, it's important to actually take a step back and reevaluate these important things. What is important to you? What is happiness or contentment means to you, you know? And that's what I wanted to just add on to that.
And, you know, I think there's a number of ways that we can be content. And, you know, then there's also a number of needs that we have as people as well. And I think, and I'll come back to that word balance, and contentment is balance, right? It's a balance between the different areas of life that we all need and require, things like gratitude, like love, relationships, connection, progress, growth, all these things, finances as well. Economics is another key element. Like you can either focus too heavily on one part and then the scales will tip out of balance because relationships will start to fail, or you'll no longer feel connection with other people because you might become insulated because you're too focused, let's say, on your business, or vice versa. Let's say you spend too much time, like I did at one point in time, too much time on the golf course. My business started to fail, my relationships started to fail. So it's getting that balance across those things. So and that's how we then feel content. And I think one of the biggest ones, or the three biggest ones for me, are growth. It's a constant progression and seeing that you're growing in a number of different ways. Security, and feeling that security there, and that usually will come not only from personal security and kind of physical security, but also from a financial security side of things, because I think finances is one of the biggest causes of stress that we can feel. So growth, security, and then just that overall connection with other people, the social connection, the relationships. They're the three biggest things for me. And obviously there's lots of others, and like I say, we've mentioned Tony Robbins' name. He's the absolute guru in this thing, so if anyone wants to kind of find out more, he covers a lot of this.
He's an amazing mentor.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think we reached a segment I called a rapid fire round of questions. We're asking questions, whatever comes to your mind first, just say it.
Okay.
So, Tana, are you ready?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. How do you find your inner peace?
In my own company.
Ooh, I like that. What are the top 3 habits that made a significant improvement in your life?
Gratitude lists, doing that regularly, exercise, that helps, and communication on a daily basis, having breakfast, lunch and dinner with my wife and my daughter, because that
having quality time with family.
Quality time with the family, yeah.
Okay, so what's the number 1 quality that makes someone a good leader?
Communication.
What's the biggest waste of human potential?
Fear.
Ooh, I like that. What's the best advice you ever received that made a significant improvement in your life? I know there are plenty of advices, but what's the best advice you've ever received?
Best advice. Wow. Yeah. So I'd say, what's the worst that can happen? So and on that point, the best advice I'd say is within the book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson. That is an incredibly powerful book. And I'd say that's, I for some reason, I'll always come back to that. So I think that's probably going to be it.
What number 1 solution to healing the world?
I think the biggest thing right now is probably the environmental side of things. I think we're kind of, as a race, we're killing the world off. There's not going to be a world left soon. So I think we can talk about sort of psychology. We can talk about contentment. We can talk about all these things. But I think unless we sort out that side of things, there's not going to be any thoughts for people to have. So I think the solution is, I don't know what that solution is, but obviously there's people working on it, but I think we need to be focusing on that more. And I strongly believe that one of the reasons that we're not as a world focusing on that from a political perspective is because it probably costs too much money, which is a shame. But call me a cynic, but come back to that kind of capitalist world we live in, unfortunately. But hey, you can't control it, so get on with what you can.
True. Based on your own life experiences, if you could fix one world problem, what would it be?
I'd say it's probably financial stress, and to be honest, that is what I'm trying to do with obviously what I'm doing with engineering wealth. So to overcome that,
wow.
I think it's, like I said, that is a huge factor in so many people's lives.
This ties in very nicely with my next question, which is like, how do you want to change the world? What's your ultimate vision and legacy you want to leave behind?
I want to help people with just give people better financial education. I think, I don't believe anyway that we give our young kids, the next generation, enough financial education to actually go out there in the world and control the finances on a day-to-day basis alone, but then also understand how the system works, how the economy works, and how we can overcome what inevitably happens to most people, which is having financial stress. So that's one of the things that I'm trying to sort of do. now.
So this is the one what you want to like leave behind in a way, the legacy you want to leave behind.
Yeah, so I'm making a very small dent right now, but hey, you know, we'll see.
No,
what happens,
that's a great dent. That's a good thing. I wish we understood. I wish I had that financial education when I was young. I really, really do, because a lot of us growing up to be like in the same, you know, industrialized era where you go to university, school, go for a job, and then, but I think it's changing nowadays. I agree with that, but however, it's not changing fast enough. And I think having the right education involving personal development books and courses and having the financial education to kids is so important. And I wish more if you could collaborate with schools, with universities to spread that. And I think that's something I would have loved to have growing up. So thank you for whatever you're doing. I think
I'm trying. I mean, obviously there's a big challenge to that, and I think, again, call me a cynic, but you know, I believe there's also reasons why we don't have great financial education is because, you know, the more people who learn how to be more tax efficient means that there's going to be less taxes paid, for example, into the government's central coffers. So, you know, and therefore into the economy. You know, there'll be less bad debt, which is a huge driving force within the economy as well. So, you know, I do believe from a cynical perspective, there are reasons why we aren't given that financial education. And therefore that will create some challenges, I believe, on a mass scale. But I do think there is a big desire for, obviously on a smaller scale, of people actually just, once they get to a certain point in life, they're like, right, now I need to take control. I need to actually do something about this. And so it's sort of also tapping into that now as well. But I think from an institutional level, it's going to be more challenging. And there's loads of people obviously out there already doing and trying to make this dent as well, which is good. But I agree. I think the world is changing into a more, even more so information-based world. So moving away from the industrial revolution and into the information revolution. So yeah, we're going to keep adapting as a society, and I think having better financial understanding is going to be important for that. So
yeah, I think maybe it's time as well to changing our system in that way, because I'm sure there are other countries who have other systems that's not involved based on tax. You know, there are other countries in the world, they don't take taxes from people. Maybe looking at it from a different point of view and reevaluating things for the best interest of the people, and actually fulfilling the highest potential of being as a human being and doing great things in the country, rather than just being stuck in the cycle of, what's my next meal is coming from. Whereas instead of actually focusing on just survival, instead of flourishing and actually becoming better, inventing, creating, because when people are in survival mode, these are not their priorities. And unfortunately, we created a society where it's based on survival mode. And that needs radical change, in my opinion. I think in that what you just also said, I understand there are reasons for it, but maybe it's time to reevaluate the whole structure of this thing, to actually move our generation, the next generation, to a better world. I just wanted to share that as well.
Yeah, I mean, agree completely. Maybe there's something there we can work on after this.
Yes,
Aisha.
Thanks. Coming to my last question, unfortunately, I know it's just been it went really fast. I just wanted one last question for you before we end. If you were to die today, what are the 3 unique pieces of knowledge or wisdom from your own life and experiences would you give your family or people?
Oh, now we're getting really deep now, aren't we, for this last question? I think definitely appreciation. I think that would be some advice to hand down, and I try and do that anyway. I mean, my daughter's probably a bit too young for that, but certainly I'm kind of trying to start instilling that into her, which is about appreciating what you already have. That's definitely the most important piece of advice I think I could give anyone. The second one would be around financial. It would be sort of to ensure that you are constantly in control and educating yourself around how money works, because I think money is such a massive thing in the world right now. It's important to understand it and how it works and how it works within society, etc. And then thirdly, the last piece of advice would be to make more time for others. I think to constantly think of ways of bringing value to other people's lives, because I think if you can bring value to other people's lives, then your life will be more valuable than you could ever imagine.
These are amazing 3 pieces of advice. So thank you for sharing that. Actually, I know I put you on the spot, and
that was a bit on the spot actually, but hopefully they passed.
No,
hopefully they're good enough.
It's whatever comes to your mind. I think that's most genuine. That's probably it's in your intuition, and that's why I asked you about this. So finally, I just want to say, if there's anything else you want to share with our audiences or listeners, last piece of advice or wisdom, and also if you want to, what's the best way for people to get contact you directly as well, or reach you directly?
So I'll pick up that one first. So in terms of contact, I mean, obviously I'm all over social media, so people can get in touch with me and reach out to me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. So Tanner H. Hicks, just search for me there. You can pick up. I'm sure you'll land on something. There you can connect with me. Engineeringwealth.co.uk is the website as well. So people can go to engineeringwealth.co.uk. And you can again connect with me that way. I think in terms of advice, I think we've covered we've covered quite a lot there. Especially off the cuff. I think and I would probably just go back to those last 3 points of the question that you said, that if that's the only thing that you take out of anything from this whole conversation, for those who are still listening even right now, is to appreciate more. In fact, I think I've forgotten the second one now. What did I say? Appreciate more.
Like connection with family.
Connect more with your family, and obviously bring more value to people. They're the 3. Definitely.
That's it.
Thank you so much, Tanner. I really, really appreciate sharing that human side of you. And I know I dig deep, but I think we got a lot of wisdom out of you and a lot of valuable information that can help a lot of people. So thank you so much for sharing this. And I really appreciate you coming on.
It's been an absolute pleasure. And you know what, I've really enjoyed this. And to us, I love chatting about all this. And I think it's really important. And I love the questions. They were deep, and I think it's also important for people to go that deep sometimes. And I think to not be afraid to share the fact that everyone has challenges. And I think sometimes we hold people kind of on these pedestals that they have perfect lives, but the reality is that everyone has crap going on. Everyone's life is tough. Period. It is difficult. So it's about how we sort of approach it, and like you say, what you're doing with your podcast about asking these probing questions is great, because people can then kind of listen to each of these things, pick up the things that they agree with, and start implementing them in their lives. So they're taking snippets from everyone else's lives and kind of trying to create their own perfect world within themselves, which I think is really, really important. So keep doing what you're doing. It's fantastic, and it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much, Tanner. I really appreciate what you said. That's what I try to do, is get the most out of people who are really successful and really get that wisdom out there for people to find their way. So thank you so much, Tanner.
Yeah, no worries.
Thank you for joining me today, everyone. To automatically receive the latest episode, please subscribe. And if you'd like to support the show, please share with one friend that you can help. And if you find it helpful, then please leave a review and comment on who you would also like to see as a guest in the future episodes. You can also message me directly on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Dr. Aisha Alsheikh at DrAishaAlsheikh. Keep working on your dreams to make them reality. And have a great morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are in the world.